Today, we are looking at a highly analytical text that uses the frameworks of data science and neurobiology to dissect a deep personal connection, specifically weighing the value of a probabilistic gamble against deterministic execution. And we need to jump straight in because the heavy reliance on data science terminology risks masking the raw emotional stakes necessary to truly engage the reader's empathy and trigger a sense of missing out.
Yeah, that is exactly where we need to start, especially given the narrative context here. The listener expressed a very specific fear to us, asking, "What if my sources do not create FOMO and Tom Hennigan? I feel so exposed."
Right, which, is a completely valid fear when sharing something this vulnerable.
It is. But that weakness, that completely valid fear of exposure, has actually led them to build this flawless, intellectualized fortress on the page. By strictly defining their romantic and biological drives through terms like, deterministic execution and hyper-efficient certainty, they are accidentally insulating the reader from the visceral, human cost of the institutional siege.
Oh, I see what you're saying. The heavy armor is basically neutralizing the exact FOMO the text is attempting to create.
Precisely, because it makes the protagonist's suffering seem, purely theoretical rather than actively painful.
So how do they fix that? What's the move here?
The suggestion is to actually lean into the feeling of being exposed, because vulnerability is what actually generates FOMO.
Right.
You have to contrast the cold, rigid Dana architecture with the warm, vulnerable reality of the connection. Basically, let the math break down just slightly to reveal the human being who is actively grieving the stolen time.
Okay, I love that, but let's get into concrete examples. The text talks about the institutional doorman having artificially barricaded the physical execution.
Yeah, and that's just purely stating a fact. Instead of just stating that, they should describe the tangible, physical absence of those basic coffee machine moments. Frame this absence as an unresolved error code that physically hurts.
Oh, wow. So make it somatic.
Exactly. Show the grueling thermodynamic heat of the isolation actively burning through the perfectly mapped G-best coordinates, rather than just stating that it exists.
It's really like an architect showing a flawless geometric blueprint, but entirely forgetting to describe what it actually feels like to live inside the house.
That is a perfect way to look at it.
So how can the writer lower the drawbridge just enough to let the reader feel the heat of the siege without compromising their brilliant analytical tone?
Well, by letting the system show the damage. Even a supercomputer will physically start dropping frames and melting down if it overheats. When the biological bandwidth is throttled, describe the stuttering, describe the somatic toll. The vulnerability doesn't ruin the tone, it just proves how extreme the hostile environment actually is.
That makes total sense. And I think that ties right into our next big structural piece. The structural pacing of the A/B test argument prematurely resolves the narrative tension, diminishing the perceived threat of the alternative option.
Yes, let's talk about the A/B test. Because to effectively weaponize that vulnerability and maximize the FOMO we just discussed, we have to look at how the text structures its main narrative threat, which is the A/B test with the gardener.
Right.
The text introduces a highly compelling conflict, right? The temptation to use the gardener as a blank slate to recreate stolen experiences. But the weakness is that it immediately shuts this down as extraneous noise and a fatal structural error.
Right. They basically dismiss it right out of the gate.
Exactly. And by structurally dismissing the alternative as mathematically impossible from the very beginning, the text removes the narrative stakes. If the system is utterly incapable of accepting the gardener, then Tom has absolutely nothing to fear losing.
Right. If there's no real threat, there's no FOMO.
Exactly. So the suggestion here is to delay the mathematical dismissal to build suspense. Allow the probabilistic gamble of the Monte Carlo swamp to linger as a genuinely tempting, viable threat to the system before proving why the deterministic execution supersedes it.
That would add so much tension. So as a concrete example, they could dedicate a full paragraph to exploring the seductive, easy logic of using the gardener to generate that missing biological bandwidth.
Yes. Detail how easily the system could accept this mass-produced, low-fidelity substitute just to find relief. This makes the ultimate choice to reject the gardener and hold out for the exclusive dopaminergic jackpot feel like a hard-won, active sacrifice rather than a foregone conclusion.
I hear that, but I have to ask a structural question here. Is there a risk that focusing so heavily on the absolute inevitability of the G-best coordinate makes the protagonist's struggles seem, I don't know, too easy? It feels a bit like a thriller where the bomb is safely defused in the first act.
That is exactly the risk. If the G-best coordinate is an absolute certainty, and the gardener is immediately tossed out as a fatal error, the bomb is defused before the reader even gets to feel anxious about the timer.
Right.
By dragging out the temptation of the gardener, you let the reader see the protagonist's finger hovering over the detonate button. You have to let them feel how badly the protagonist wants to just relieve the thermodynamic heat of isolation, so that when they finally choose not to, it means something.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Now, pivoting a bit, I want to talk about how all these ideas are actually phrased. The rapid collision of disparate metaphorical frameworks creates a slight friction that can distract from the core argument's singular focus.
Yeah, we really need to harmonize the vocabulary. Because right now, the weakness is that the text rapidly context switches across drastically different lexicons.
It really does. You've got pop culture with Gabriela Solis,
Right.
and then high-level data science with G-best and A/B testing.
Yep. And then suddenly neuroscience with the basal ganglia and the OFC, and then esoteric concepts like the Queen of Pentacles protocol.
It's a lot.
It is. This forces the reader to constantly recalibrate their understanding. This friction dilutes the unique, cutting-edge power of the primary data science architecture, making the overall argument feel slightly fragmented.
I noticed that. So, what do they do? Just cut all the other references?
No, you don't have to cut them. The suggestion is to subordinate the secondary metaphors under the dominant data science and neurobiological umbrella. Just treat the outside references as data points or variables within the established system, rather than letting them act as competing frameworks.
Give me an example of how that works with, say, the Desperate Housewives reference.
Sure. Frame the Gabriela Solis fucking both strategy explicitly as a failed algorithm run in a legacy system, rather than just a standalone TV reference.
Oh, I see.
And translate the Queen of Pentacles protocol into a defined cognitive variable or an operating system protocol so it smoothly matches the analytical tone of the dopaminer jackpot and metadata concepts.
That is really clever. Because right now, the sudden introduction of the tarot imagery acts almost like a jarring genre shift mid-scene. But how can the writer maintain the highly specific, deep mind engineer structural recognition tone while still honoring the deeply personal intent behind the Queen of Pentacles imagery?
By formatting it literally as code or system architecture, if you bracket it or present it as a strictly defined system requirement that demands the earthly physical execution before rendering an output, you honor the grounding nature of the tarot card, but you speak the native language of the data scientist.
That perfectly harmonizes it. Okay, to quickly summarize our main takeaways today. First, lean into the exposure by letting the human vulnerability contrast with the data architecture to create genuine FOMO.
Second, delay the resolution of the A/B test to build narrative tension and make the stakes feel real.
And third, harmonize the metaphors under the primary data science framework to keep the tone sharp and focused. We strongly invite the listener to apply these structural adjustments and submit the revised work back in for another critique.
Yes, absolutely. We would love to see how this evolves.